Two brothers. Same household. Same parents. Same neighborhood. Same school. Same opportunities. At least, that is what it looked like from the outside. But 30 years later, one of them is financially free, deeply fulfilled, and building something that will outlast him. The other is still waiting for the right moment, the right job, the right break that somehow never arrives. What separated them was not talent. It was not luck. It was not even hard work in the traditional sense. It was the invisible architecture of their minds, the way they thought about money, opportunity, risk, and time. One had built the mental framework of the wealthy. The other had unknowingly imprisoned himself inside the mental framework of scarcity. Today, we are going to dissect both of those frameworks, not as a moral judgment, but as a roadmap. Because the extraordinary truth is this: your circumstances can change the moment your thinking changes. Let us call the first brother Marcus and the second, Daniel. Both lost their jobs in an economic downturn. Marcus woke up the next morning and said to himself, "This is a disruption. What does this disruption make possible that wasn't possible before?" Within 6 months, he had launched a small consulting service using the skills his employer had trained him for, skills he now owned entirely. Daniel woke up and said, "This always happens to me." He spent 3 months in paralysis, convinced the system was rigged against him, waiting for someone to rescue him from a situation he believed he had no power to change. The rich thinker operates from an identity of agency. They believe, at an almost cellular level, that they are the primary architect of their life. They do not interpret misfortune as a verdict on their worth. They interpret it as data. The poor thinker, by contrast, has outsourced their narrative. They are the protagonist of a story written by someone else: the economy, their boss, their past, their family. And when you believe the pen is not in your hand, you stop writing. There is perhaps no more profound distinction between rich thinking and poor thinking than the relationship each has with time. The poor thinker lives in what psychologists call a compressed time horizon. The question driving their decisions is always, what do I need right now? The pleasure of today is worth more to them, neurologically speaking, than the security of tomorrow. This is not weakness. It is often the product of genuine scarcity, of a life where tomorrow was never guaranteed. But it becomes a trap. The rich thinker operates on an extended time horizon. They think in decades, not days. When Marcus considered whether to invest 12 months building his consulting business without guaranteed income, he did not ask, "Can I afford this sacrifice right now?" He asked, "What does my life look like in 10 years if I make this investment versus if I don't?" Warren Buffett famously said that someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Rich thinking is the act of planting trees you may not immediately sit beneath. Every wealthy individual you have ever admired has, at some point, made a present sacrifice for a future self they had not yet met. Poor thinking cannot comprehend that transaction. Rich thinking lives for it. Here is something that sounds counterintuitive until it doesn't. The poor thinker is actually taking the greater risk. Daniel never started the business. He never made the investment. He never took the calculated leap. He told himself he was being responsible, practical, safe. But safety, as it turns out, is one of the most expensive illusions available. While Daniel protected himself from the visible risk of failure, he was completely exposed to the invisible risk of stagnation, of arriving at 60 with the same income, the same anxieties, and an additional burden, the knowledge that he never tried. Marcus understood something that took Daniel decades to even consider, that in a world of compound growth, inaction compounds just as aggressively as action. The cost of not investing is not zero. It is everything you would have built. Rich thinkers do not court recklessness. They calculate risk with precision, distinguish between risks worth taking and risks worth avoiding, and then move. Poor thinkers conflate all risk as danger and mistake avoidance for wisdom. The result is a life lived entirely within parentheses, between the dash and the date on the gravestone, without ever fully inhabiting the space. Listen carefully to how people speak, and you will hear their entire financial future encoded in their sentences. The poor thinker says, "I can't afford that." The rich thinker says, "How can I afford that?" One sentence closes a door. The other is an engineering problem in search of a solution. The poor thinker says, "That's not for people like me." The rich thinker says, "What would someone who has achieved that know, that I don't yet know?" One sentence builds a wall. The other builds a curriculum. The poor thinker says, "I've tried everything." The rich thinker says, "I haven't found the right approach yet." One sentence declares a verdict. The other keeps the investigation open. This is not merely positive thinking, that hollow, Instagram caption version of optimism that ignores reality. This is something far more sophisticated. It is a cognitive posture of relentless inquiry. Rich thinkers do not pretend obstacles don't exist. They simply refuse to grant those obstacles the final word. Robert Kiyosaki, the author behind Rich Dad Poor Dad, observed that his rich father never said, "I can't." He said, "How can I?" That single linguistic substitution encodes an entirely different relationship with possibility, with agency, with the future. By the time Marcus was 35, something interesting had happened to his social circle. Almost unconsciously, he had surrounded himself with people who were building things, not because they were wealthier, but because they were aligned. They challenged each other's assumptions. They shared resources, ideas, introductions. They held each other accountable to the vision each had declared for their own life. Daniel's social circle, by contrast, had become an ecosystem of shared complaint. Not because his friends were bad people, they were not. But the emotional currency of their gatherings was commiseration rather than collaboration. They bonded over what wasn't working. And there is a subtle but devastating consequence to that kind of intimacy. It makes the problems feel permanent, because in that environment, the problems are never really meant to be solved. Jim Rohn's famous observation, that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, is not merely motivational folklore. It is neuroscience. Your brain is constantly, unconsciously calibrating what is normal based on the evidence around it. If the people around you believe wealth is for someone else, your brain will quietly file that belief as fact. Rich thinkers deliberately architect their environments. They read voraciously, not to escape, but to expand the diameter of their perceived possible. They seek mentors, not just peers. They place themselves in rooms where the conversation stretches rather than confirms. Marcus and Daniel are still brothers. They still have Christmas dinner together. They still love each other. But they inhabit entirely different realities. Not because the world treated them differently, but because they interpreted the world differently. And that is perhaps the most important sentence in this entire video. The world did not build the gap between them. Their minds did. Here is the singular shift that separates rich thinking from poor thinking, distilled to its essence. The rich thinker believes that the present moment is not a permanent destination, it is a launching point. Whatever is true today is merely the raw material for what becomes true tomorrow, if they choose to work on it. The poor thinker believes that the present moment is evidence of who they are, what they deserve, and what the ceiling of their life looks like. And when you mistake a temporary station for a permanent identity, you stop doing the only thing that could ever change it. You don't need to be Marcus. You don't need his business or his confidence or his social circle, not yet. You need only one thing to begin: the willingness to question the thoughts you have never thought to question. Because the wealthiest asset any human being possesses is not their bank account, their network, or their resume. It is the quality of the thoughts they choose, every single day, to entertain. Start there. Everything else follows. If this shifted something in you, share it with one person who needs it. And if you want to go deeper on the psychology of wealth mindset, subscribe, because we are just getting started.